I'm Rose, 29 female. I live in a small but comfortable one-bedroom apartment that I designed the layout for myself, a little perk of being an architectural drafter. My life is built on precision and planning. From the clean lines of the blueprints I create to the quiet, orderly structure of my days. For years, I believed that if I was self-sufficient, responsible, and never asked for anything, I was doing everything right. It turns out I was just making myself easy to forget, especially for the people who were supposed to remember me most. For the third year in a row, my birthday passed in complete silence from my family. Not a card, not a text, not even a missed call. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was an adult and birthdays were just another day. But 2 days later, when I saw my sister's social media post, the lie I'd been telling myself shattered. There she was, grinning in a brand new, sun-drenched apartment with a caption that read, "Thanks Mom and Dad for the new apartment." That's when I finally understood. I wasn't forgotten, I was invisible. And in that moment, I decided I was done. I blocked them all, Mom, Dad, my sister, on every platform. The silence I got in return was deafening until my dad showed up at my door, begging to talk. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My 29th birthday began like any other Tuesday. The alarm went off at 6:30 a.m. I brewed my coffee and I sat at my drafting table, reviewing the plans for a new community center. The work was my sanctuary. In the world of architecture, every line has a purpose, every measurement is critical. There is no room for ambiguity or neglect. A support beam isn't sort of there, it either is or the whole structure fails. It's a world of absolutes, so different from the shifting sands of my family life. I spent the morning engrossed in the project, the quiet hum of my computer the only sound in my apartment. My phone, sitting face down on the corner of my desk, remained silent. I didn't expect a marching band, but in the back of my mind, a small, hopeful part of me still listened for the familiar ping of a happy birthday text. By noon, that hope had dwindled to a faint echo. I took a break for lunch, making myself a sandwich and scrolling through my personal email. There were automated birthday wishes from my bank, my dentist, and a clothing store I'd shopped at once. It was a sad, digital chorus of corporate well wishes. My friends, bless them, had already filled my messaging apps with cheerful notes and silly gifts. My best friend, Maya, had sent a video of her 2-year-old singing a mangled version of the birthday song, which made me smile genuinely for the first time all day. But from my family, my mom Sharon, my dad Robert, and my younger sister Isabel, there was nothing. The first year it happened, on my 27th birthday, I was hurt. I called my mom that evening, my voice tight. "Oh, honey, I am so sorry," she'd exclaimed, her voice thick with what sounded like genuine remorse. "Things have been so crazy with Izzy's graduation. It completely slipped my mind. We'll celebrate this weekend, I promise." The weekend came and went with a vague mention of getting together soon, which never materialized. The second year, my 28th, the silence was even louder. This time I didn't call. I waited. A week later, my dad called to ask for advice on fixing a leaky faucet. He didn't mention my birthday. When I gently brought it up, he sounded flustered. "Oh, Rosie, I'm a terrible father. With everything going on with your sister's new job hunt, my mind has been a sieve." Again, Isabel was the reason, the convenient black hole where my milestones disappeared. So this year, on my 29th, I expected the silence. I'd conditioned myself to it. I was the responsible one, the stable one. I'd put myself through college with a combination of scholarships and part-time jobs, never asking for a dime. I'd secured a great job in a competitive field and built a life for myself from the ground up. Izzy, on the other hand, was the creative, the free spirit. At 24, her career as a social media influencer was a series of sponsored posts and brand deals that seemed to fluctuate wildly. She was always in the middle of some drama, a breakup, a falling out with a brand, a sudden need to find herself on a trip to Bali that our parents funded. She was a constant, squeaky wheel, and she always got the grease. I was the quiet, well-oiled machine that everyone assumed would just keep running without any maintenance. That evening, I treated myself to my favorite Thai food and opened a nice bottle of wine. I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker to life. It was peaceful, but a profound sense of loneliness settled over me. It wasn't just about a forgotten Day. It was about feeling like an afterthought in my own family's narrative. I was the prologue they skipped to get to the main story, Izzy. I wondered what they were doing. Was Mom, a real estate agent, busy closing a deal? Was Dad, who owned a hardware store, doing inventory? Or were they both wrapped up in Izzy's latest crisis or triumph? I finished my wine, washed my dishes, and went to bed before 10. I had a deadline the next day. I told myself it was just another Tuesday. But the hollow feeling in my chest told me it was something more. It was the quiet, cumulative weight of years of being placed second. The foundation of my relationship with my family was cracking, and I was the only one who seemed to notice the fissures spreading beneath my feet. I fell asleep wondering how many more cracks it could take before it all came crumbling down. The silence from my phone was no longer just an oversight. It was a statement. It said, "You are not a priority." And the worst part was, I was starting to believe it. The 2 days following my birthday were a blur of work. I buried myself in blueprints and building codes, finding comfort in the predictable logic of my job. The hollow ache was still there, but I pushed it down, compartmentalizing it as I always did. I told myself that my value wasn't determined by their memory. My achievements, my independence, my carefully constructed life, those were the things that defined me. It was a mantra I repeated until it almost felt true. On Thursday evening, after a particularly grueling day refining a set of structural plans, I finally allowed myself to relax. I made a cup of tea, curled up on my sofa, and did what I usually avoided when I was feeling low. I opened social media. My feed was the usual mix of friends' vacation photos, political rants, and dog videos. I scrolled mindlessly, a passive observer in the digital lives of others. Then, I saw it. It was a post from my sister, Izzy. The main photo was of her, beaming, holding up a set of keys in front of a sleek, modern-looking apartment door. She was wearing a trendy outfit that I knew cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The sunlight streamed in from a large window behind her, catching the highlights in her professionally styled hair. It was a picture of pure, effortless success. But it was the caption that felt like a physical blow. It read, "New chapter. Sparkle's so incredibly grateful to my amazing parents for helping me secure my dream apartment in the city. Couldn't have done it without you, Mom and Dad. New home, city living blessed." I clicked through the carousel of images. There was Izzy posing in an empty living room with floor-to-ceiling windows. Izzy on a balcony with a stunning view of the downtown skyline. And the final picture, the one that made my breath catch in my throat, was of her standing between our smiling parents. My mom, Sharon, had her arm wrapped tightly around Izzy's shoulders, beaming with pride. My dad, Robert, stood on her other side, looking happier and more relaxed than I had seen him in years. They were a perfect, happy family, celebrating a major life achievement. My birthday, just 2 days prior, hadn't even registered. But a down payment on a luxury apartment for Izzy, that warranted a full-blown photo op. My mind started racing, connecting the dots with the cold precision of a drafter finalizing a plan. The vague excuses, the crazy schedules, the constant talk about how tight money was whenever I had even hinted at needing help in the past. During my final year of college, my 10-year-old car had finally died. I remember calling my dad, my voice trembling with stress, asking if he could possibly co-sign a small loan for a reliable used vehicle. He had sighed heavily. "Rosie, you know money is tight. Your sister's tuition. It's a lot. I just don't think we can stretch ourselves that thin right now. You're so good at saving. I'm sure you can figure something out." I did figure it out. I worked 30 hours a week as a waitress on top of my full-course load and bought a clunker for cash. I ate ramen noodles for months, but I did it. I was proud of that. But now, seeing that picture, the pride curdled into something bitter and painful. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the disparity, the flagrant, unapologetic favoritism. They had funded Izzy's entire life, her private university tuition, her unpaid internships, her brand-building trips, and now an apartment. An apartment in the city where I knew for a fact that a down payment would be tens of thousands of dollars. Money they supposedly never had. I felt a wave of nausea. I scrolled through the comments on Izzy's post. They were filled with fawning praise from her followers. OMG, congrats! You deserve it! Best parents ever! My aunt, my mother's sister, had even commented, so proud of you all, a beautiful home for a beautiful girl. Did any of them know it was my birthday 2 days ago? Did any of them care? I felt like I was looking at my family through a distorted lens, but for the first time, everything was sharp and clear. I was the support structure, the reliable foundation they never had to worry about. Izzy was the facade, the beautiful, decorative element that got all the attention and resources. And my parents were the architects, carefully designing a family where one child was a penthouse suite and the other was the boiler room, essential, but hidden away and ignored. The anger that had been simmering for years finally boiled over. It was a hot, cleansing rage. It burned away the hurt and the hope and left behind a cold, hard certainty. I couldn't be a part of this anymore. My finger hovered over Izzy's profile. Then, with a decisive tap, I blocked her. Then I went to my mother's profile. Blocked. Then my father's. Blocked. I went through my phone contacts and did the same. I didn't want to hear the excuses. I didn't want the fake apologies. I wanted silence. But this time, it would be a silence of my own choosing. The screen in front of me felt like a blank blueprint, and for the first time, I felt ready to draw a new plan for my life, one that didn't include them. The first 24 hours after I blocked my family were strangely liberating. It felt like I had muted a constant, low-level hum of anxiety that I hadn't even realized was always there. There were no more subconscious checks of my phone, no more waiting for a call that would never come, no more bracing for the next story of Izzy's latest adventure, funded by the bank of mom and dad. The silence I had created was a protective wall, and inside it, I could finally breathe. I spent the day, a Friday, focusing on work with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. I finalized the community center plans, sent them off to the senior architect, and felt a surge of professional pride. This was real. This was something I had built myself. That evening, Maya came over with a belated birthday cake and a bottle of champagne. I told her everything. I showed her Izzy's post, my voice devoid of the tears she probably expected. Instead, it was flat, clinical, as if I were describing a structural flaw in a building. And the down payment on an apartment in that district, I concluded, pulling up a real estate app on my tablet, would be, at minimum, $50,000, probably more. Maya's eyes widened. She had been my friend since college and had witnessed my struggles firsthand. She remembered the nights I'd come home exhausted from my waitressing job, my hands smelling of grease, just to stay up until 3 a.m. studying. She remembered my panic when my car broke down and I had to bike 7 miles to my internship. 50,000? She whispered, her voice laced with disbelief. Rose, that's criminal. It's not about the money, not really, I said, though it was partly about the money. It's the lie. All those years they told me to be responsible, to stand on my own 2 feet. I thought it was a lesson in character. But it wasn't. It was a business decision. They were investing all their capital in their high-risk, high-reward asset, Izzy, and I was the low-yield bond they just left to mature on its own. We sat in silence for a moment, the gravity of it sinking in. The cake sat on the coffee table, its cheerful frosting a stark contrast to the mood. So what now? Maya asked gently. I don't know, I admitted. For now, the silence. I need to see what my life feels like without the weight of their expectations and their neglect. The next day, Saturday, the first crack in my wall appeared. An email from my Aunt Carol, my mom's sister. The subject line was simply family. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had blocked her on social media, but I'd forgotten about email. I hesitated, then opened it. It was a short, carefully worded message. Rose, dear, your mother called me, very upset. She said you're not answering her calls. I know families can have disagreements, but whatever is going on, I hope you can find it in your heart to talk to them. Your mother loves you very much. Loves me. The word seemed hollow, a generic platitude. Did she love me when she was smiling for a photo, celebrating the purchase of a home she helped buy, just 48 hours after she couldn't even be bothered to send a text for my birthday? The email felt less like a genuine olive branch and more like a tool of manipulation. My mom, unable to reach me directly, had deployed a flying monkey. I typed a brief, polite reply. "Thank you for your concern, Aunt Carol. This is a private matter between my parents, my sister, and me. I need some space right now." I hit send before I could overthink it. The email confirmed my suspicions. My mother's reaction wasn't concern for my well-being, it was distress at her loss of control. I had taken away her ability to manage the narrative. For years, the family dynamic had been set. Izzy was the star, and I was the quiet, dependable stagehand. I wasn't supposed to have needs or demands. I wasn't supposed to get angry. By blocking them, I had walked off the stage, and it had clearly thrown the entire production into chaos. That afternoon, I started digging. My curiosity had morphed into a cold need for facts. My parents had always been secretive about their finances, but there were pieces of the puzzle I could access. Izzy, in her quest for online fame, had a tendency to overshare. I went to her public social media pages using my browser's incognito mode. I scrolled back through years of posts. There it was, laid out in a curated timeline of consumption. The brand new laptop for her freshman year of college, a model far more expensive than the refurbished one I had used. The spring break trip to Cancun, the designer handbag she'd treated herself to after landing her first big brand deal, a deal I now suspected was heavily subsidized by our parents. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. A post from 2 years ago, a photo of my dad and Izzy standing in front of a shiny new car, a ribbon tied around it. The caption read, "Graduation present. My dad is the best, helping me get a reliable car for my new adult life." A reliable car. The exact thing I had begged for help with, the thing they had insisted they couldn't possibly afford to help me with. The timeline matched up almost exactly with when my own car had died. They hadn't just said no to me, they had said no to me while simultaneously planning to say yes to her on a much grander scale. It was a calculated, deliberate choice. They had weighed our needs, and I had been found wanting. The birthday was just the final straw, the most recent and blatant example of a pattern of behavior that stretched back years. This wasn't a series of careless oversights. This was a policy. And understanding that changed everything. The hurt began to recede, replaced by a steely, resolute calm. I wasn't a victim of neglect anymore. I was a witness to a long-term, systemic injustice within my own family, and I was no longer willing to be a silent party to it. The discovery of Izzy's graduation car was the tipping point. The emotional, reactive anger I had felt initially began to solidify into a cold, methodical need for the full truth. As an architectural drafter, my entire career was based on uncovering and understanding the underlying structures of things. I dealt in foundations, load-bearing walls, and electrical grids, the hidden systems that make a building function. I decided to apply the same principles to my family. I needed to see the full blueprint of their financial support for Izzy to understand the true scale of the disparity. It was no longer just about feeling slighted. It was about gathering evidence, not for a confrontation, but for my own peace of mind. I needed to know if I was crazy, if I was overreacting, or if my feelings were based on a quantifiable reality. My starting point was something my dad had said to me years ago. "We set up a small college fund for both of you girls," he had told me when I was in high school. "It won't cover everything, but it's a start." My fund had amounted to about $10,000, which I had been incredibly grateful for. It covered my first year of tuition at a state university, and I'd worked to cover the rest. I always assumed Izzy had received the same. My parents were always talking about fairness, about treating us exactly the same. Now, that mantra seemed like a joke. The problem was, how could I find out? I remembered that the accounts were held at a specific credit union our family had used for decades. My dad had once made me a cosigner on a small savings account there when I was a teenager so I could learn about banking. I had long since moved my own finances to a national bank, but I wondered if I was still in their system. On a whim, I tried logging into the credit union's online portal using an old password I vaguely remembered. After 2 failed attempts, I got in. I felt a jolt of adrenaline. My old savings account was there, dormant, with a balance of $1.27. But as an account holder, I had access to a bit more. I navigated to the document center, searching for old statements. And then I found it, a feature that allowed you to see linked household accounts for marketing purposes. Because I had once been on a joint account with my father, a link still existed. It didn't give me full access, but it did show the account types under his name. There were the standard accounts: checking, savings, a mortgage account. But then there were two others, labeled Uniform Transfer to Minors Act, UTMA accounts. One was titled Robert Last Name CUSD for Rose Last Name UTMA. The other was Robert Last Name CUSD for Isabel Last Name UTMA. These were the college funds. I clicked on mine. I could only see basic details and the history before the account was closed and the funds were transferred to me for college. The final balance had been, as I remembered, around $10,000. Then, my heart pounding, I clicked on the one for Isabel. It was still active, and the account summary was visible. I stared at the screen, my mind struggling to process the number. Over the years, my parents had deposited money consistently. But the amounts were far greater than what I knew had been in my account. There were several large, lump sum deposits that coincided with their annual bonuses. The current balance was over $30,000, and that was after 4 years of her private university tuition had been paid. I dug deeper. Using the portal's search function, I looked up cleared checks from the main checking account that was once linked to mine. The history only went back a few years, but it was enough. I found check images for rent payments made out to Izzy's old landlord, car payments to a luxury auto brand, credit card payments to a card that wasn't under my parents' names. It was all there, a clear, undeniable paper trail of financial support that dwarfed anything I had ever received or even dared to ask for. The total was staggering. Between the remaining college fund, the car, the rent, and what I could only assume were countless other expenses, my parents had easily spent over $100,000 more on Izzy than they had on me. The fairness they had always preached was a complete fabrication. It was a story they told themselves and me to maintain a veneer of equality while actively practicing the opposite. I felt a strange sense of vindication. I wasn't being overly sensitive. I wasn't ungrateful. I was a victim of a profoundly unbalanced system. They hadn't just forgotten my birthday, they had systematically devalued my independence while rewarding my sister's dependence. My self-sufficiency wasn't a trait they admired, it was a convenience they exploited. It allowed them to pour all their resources into the child who demanded more. I took screenshots of everything: the UTMA account balance, the check images, the car payments. I saved them to a secure folder on my computer, labeling it evidence. I didn't know what I would do with it, but I knew I needed it. It was my proof. It was the blueprint of their betrayal. As I sat there, the glow of the monitor illuminating the dark room, the last vestiges of my childhood image of my parents crumbled. They weren't just flawed, forgetful people. They were active participants in a long-running deception. The feeling of hurt was gone now, replaced by something colder and harder. It was the feeling of resolve. They had built this dynamic, this unbalanced structure. And I was about to walk away and let them see what happens when a critical support beam is removed. The entire edifice was about to become dangerously unstable. Armed with the undeniable proof of my family's financial favoritism, my perspective shifted entirely. The raw emotion that had fueled my initial decision to block them was now reinforced by cold, hard data. It wasn't about a forgotten birthday anymore. It was about 2 decades of systemic inequality. My resolve hardened from a defensive measure into a proactive strategy. I wasn't just hiding from them. I was actively building a new life where their influence and their hypocrisy could no longer reach me. My wall of silence was about to be reinforced with bricks of tangible independence. The first step was to address any remaining financial entanglements, no matter how small. I still had an old cell phone on my parents' family plan. I had offered to pay my share for years, but my mom always waved it off, saying, Don't be silly, it's barely any extra. I now saw this for what it was, not a kindness but a tether, a way to keep me connected and subtly indebted. The next morning, I walked into a phone store and set up my own plan. It was more expensive, but the feeling of cutting that final financial cord was priceless. I walked out with a new number, a symbolic and practical step in my emancipation. Only Maya and a few close friends would have it. My family now had no direct line to me at all. Next, I turned my attention to the future. For years, I had harbored a dream of starting my own small architectural design firm, focusing on sustainable and affordable housing. It had always felt like a distant fantasy, something to work towards over the next decade. My parents had always been dismissive of the idea. "That's so risky, Rose," my mother would say. "Why not stay with your stable job? You have a good pension." I now realized their advice wasn't about my security, it was about their comfort. My stable, predictable career path required nothing from them and allowed them to focus all their energy and resources on Izzy. My ambition was inconvenient. With a surge of defiant energy, I pulled out my old business plan. The numbers that had once seemed intimidating now looked achievable. The $50,000 down payment for Izzy's apartment became a new benchmark for me. If they could pull that amount out of thin air for her, then I could surely build it for myself through hard work and discipline. I spent the entire weekend revamping my plan, researching small business loans, and creating a portfolio of my best independent design work. I opened a separate high-yield savings account and named it Business Fund. I set up an aggressive automatic transfer from my paycheck. Every dollar that went into it felt like a brick being laid in the foundation of my new life. During this time, the attempts to contact me escalated. After the email from my aunt, a few of my cousins reached out with casual, "Hey, how are you?" messages that I knew were prompted by my mother. I ignored them. They were part of the old world, the family structure I was leaving behind. Then came a letter in the mail, handwritten by my mom. My hands trembled slightly as I saw her familiar cursive on the envelope. I almost threw it away, but my need for information won out. I opened it. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive guilt. "Rose, I don't know what we've done to make you shut us out like this," it began. "My heart is broken. All I know is that one day my daughter was talking to me, and the next you vanished. If I forgot your birthday, I am so sorry. You know how hectic things are. Please, just call me. We need to talk." There it was, the minimization, "if I forgot your birthday." The classic self-victimization, "my heart is broken." And the complete lack of acknowledgement of the real issue, which I knew she was aware of Izzy's apartment. She wasn't sorry for the inequality, she was sorry she got caught. She was sorry I was no longer playing by her rules. The letter, meant to pull me back in, had the opposite effect. It solidified my decision. I took the letter and placed it in the evidence folder alongside the financial screenshots. It was another piece of the blueprint, showing the flimsy, manipulative materials they had used to construct our family dynamic. My work became my solace and my weapon. I took on extra freelance projects, working late into the night. I wasn't just drafting buildings, I was drafting my future. The exhaustion was profound, but it was a good kind of tired, the satisfying ache of building something that was truly mine. Maya was my rock through it all. "You're not just cutting them off, you're leveling up," she told me one night as I was hunched over my laptop, finalizing a design for a freelance client. "They wanted you to stay small, and instead, you're choosing to grow." She was right. This wasn't just about revenge or anger anymore. It was about self-preservation and self-creation. I was redefining my own value, not based on their approval or attention, but on my own merits, my own work, and my own dreams. The wall I was building wasn't just to keep them out. It was to create a safe space within which I could finally flourish. And with every new client, every dollar saved, every step I took toward my own goals, I could feel myself getting stronger, taller, and more unshakable. It happened on a Sunday morning, 2 weeks after I'd blocked them. I was at my drafting table, sipping coffee and sketching out ideas for a new project, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't realized was possible. The city was quiet, the sun was streaming through my window, and my new phone number had remained blissfully silent except for a few texts from friends. Then, there was a knock on my apartment door. Not a gentle tap, but a firm, insistent rapping that echoed through my quiet space. My heart leaped into my throat. I rarely had unexpected visitors. I peered through the peephole and my blood ran cold. It was my father, Robert. He looked terrible. His face was pale and drawn, his shoulders were slumped, and he had dark circles under his eyes. He looked older than he had in the photo with Izzy. He knocked again, harder this time. "Rose, please, I know you're in there. I just want to talk. Please, Rosie." Hearing my childhood nickname from his strained voice sent a complicated wave of emotions through me: pity, anger, and a deep, residual ache of a daughter who had just wanted her dad. For a moment, I considered not answering. I could just stand there silent until he gave up and left. But looking at his desperate face, I realized that this was the confrontation I had been both dreading and, on some level, preparing for. Hiding wouldn't solve anything. This was a load-bearing wall in my new life, and it had to be tested. Taking a deep breath, I unlocked the door and opened it just enough to talk, keeping the security chain engaged. We stood there for a long moment, the chain a physical representation of the barrier between us. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a desperate, pleading expression. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice cracking. "No," I said. My voice was calmer and steadier than I expected. "We can talk right here. What do you want?" His face fell, but he nodded, accepting my terms. "Your mother is a wreck," he began. "She hasn't stopped crying. She thinks you hate her." I didn't respond. This was the opening I expected, positioning my mom as the primary victim. We miss you," he continued, stumbling over the words. "This silence is killing us. What did we do that was so bad that you had to cut us out completely?" "You want to know what you did?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "For 3 years you forgot my birthday. For my entire adult life, you've made me feel like an afterthought. And while you were telling me that money was too tight to help me with a reliable car so I could get to my internship, you were buying a brand new one for Izzy as a graduation present. While I was working 30 hours a week to put myself through school, you were funding her life. And just 2 days after you couldn't be bothered to send me a text message, you bought her an apartment." My father flinched as if I had physically struck him. He seemed to shrink in the doorway. It's not like that," he stammered, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. "Of course it's like that," I shot back, my voice rising. "I've seen the accounts, Dad. I've seen the checks. Don't you dare stand there and lie to me. Don't tell me you treated us the same. Don't tell me you were being fair." I saw a flicker of shock in his eyes, followed by shame. He knew I had him. The vague platitudes and excuses wouldn't work anymore. I had the receipts. "How did you?" he started to ask, but trailed off. "That doesn't matter," I said, cutting him off. "What matters is that the entire foundation of our relationship is a lie. You didn't raise 2 daughters. You raised a princess and a workhorse, and the workhorse is officially retired." He leaned his forehead against the doorframe, looking utterly defeated. We messed up, Rosie," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "We didn't mean for it to be like this. Izzy, she just always seemed to need more. She wasn't as tough as you. You were always so strong, so independent. We were proud of you. We figured you had it handled." It was the most pathetic, infuriating excuse I had ever heard. "You figured I had it handled," I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. "So you penalized me for my competence? You rewarded her for her helplessness? That isn't parenting, Dad. That's poor management. You enabled her and you abandoned me. There's a difference." "What can we do to fix this?" he pleaded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'll do anything." The question hung in the air between us. A year ago, I would have melted. I would have listed my grievances, accepted a tearful apology, and things would have gone back to the way they were. But I wasn't that person anymore. I had the blueprints now. I knew the foundation was rotten to the core. A simple patch job wasn't going to work. "There is nothing you can do to fix this right now," I said, my voice softening slightly but losing none of its resolve. "This isn't something that can be fixed in one conversation on my doorstep. You and Mom have to understand the sheer scale of what you've done. This was years of deception. You don't get to just say sorry and have it all go away." He looked crushed. "So that's it? You're just gone." "I need space," I said, the words feeling final and true. "I need a lot of space. I need to live my life without feeling like I'm constantly being judged and devalued. Maybe one day things can be different, but that day is not today. You need to go home, Dad." He looked at me for a long moment, searching my face for any sign of weakness, any crack in my resolve. He found none. He finally straightened up, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "I love you, Rosie," he whispered. "I'm sorry." He then turned and walked slowly down the hallway. I closed the door, slid the deadbolt, and leaned against it, my body trembling with the adrenaline of the confrontation. I hadn't cried. I hadn't screamed. I had stood my ground, stated the facts, and held my boundary. The knock on the door had been the ultimate test, and my new foundation had held. The weeks after the confrontation with my father were the quietest of all. It seemed my message had finally been received. There were no more emails from aunts, no more letters from my mother, no more unexpected knocks on the door. The silence was complete. It was a strange and unsettling peace, like the stillness after a major storm. The landscape of my life had been irrevocably altered, and I was left to survey the damage and begin the slow, deliberate process of rebuilding. The evidence folder on my computer remained unopened. I didn't need to look at it anymore. The facts were etched into my memory, not as sources of pain, but as the cornerstones of my new reality. They were the reference points that kept me from backsliding, from romanticizing a past that never really existed. When a wave of sadness or a pang of guilt would wash over me, and it did, especially on lonely evenings, I would remind myself of the numbers, of the lies, of my father's pathetic excuse. The feelings would recede, replaced once again by the cold, hard clarity of my decision. My life began to take on a new shape, one defined by my own choices and ambitions. My freelance business started to gain momentum. A design I did for a small, eco-friendly coffee shop won a local design award, which led to a flurry of new clients. I was working harder than ever, but it was a joyful, energizing work. Every contract signed, every project completed, was a testament to my own ability, completely untethered from my family's influence or approval. The business fund grew steadily, the number a tangible symbol of my progress. My dream of starting my own firm no longer felt like a fantasy, it felt like an inevitability. It was a matter of when, not if. Maya remained my steadfast support. We established a new Sunday tradition, brunch. We'd talk for hours about my business, her life, and everything in between. During one of these brunches, about 2 months after my dad's visit, she asked, "Have you heard anything at all?" I shook my head. "Nothing, it's like they've just accepted it." "How do you feel about that?" she asked, her expression carefully neutral. I thought for a moment, swirling the coffee in my mug. I said slowly, "it proves my point." When I was compliant and silent, I was useful. Now that I have boundaries and a voice, I'm too much work. Their silence now is just as telling as their silence on my birthday. They haven't changed. They've just retreated. The real test came 6 months later. I received a certified letter which I had to sign for. It was from a law firm. My stomach clenched with anxiety. Inside was a letter from an estate lawyer and a cashier's check. The letter was brief and formal. It stated that on behalf of their clients, Robert and Sharon, they were transferring a sum of money to me. The amount on the check made me gasp. It was $75,000. The letter explained that this was an equalization payment intended to balance past financial gifts made within the family. There was no personal note, no apology, just the cold, legal transaction. I sat with the check in my hand for a long time, my mind reeling. This was their solution. They couldn't fix the emotional damage, so they were trying to fix the financial spreadsheet. It was the most clinical, detached, and utterly on-brand thing they could have possibly done. Part of me was insulted. Did they really think they could buy their way back into my life? That a check could erase years of emotional neglect? But another, more pragmatic part of me saw the check for what it was, an admission of guilt. It was the only apology they were capable of giving, a transactional one. It was their way of saying, "You were right." I didn't know what to do. Cashing it felt like accepting a bribe. Ripping it up felt like a hollow, symbolic gesture that would only hurt me. I called Maya. "What do I do?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You cash it," she said without a moment's hesitation. "Rose, this isn't a gift, this is restitution. This is the back pay you are owed for being the responsible one. This is your seed money. This is the universe, and your parents' guilty conscience, handing you the keys to your future. Don't you dare let your pride get in the way of your dream. She was right. I took the check to the bank the next day and deposited it directly into my business fund. It didn't heal the wounds. It didn't make me want to pick up the phone and call them. But it did feel like justice in a strange, imperfect way. It was the final piece I needed to complete my own foundation. A year to the day after my 29th birthday, I signed the lease on a small office space for Rose Design Studio. It was a modest space, but it was mine. As I stood in the empty room, the smell of fresh paint in the air, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had built this. My pain, my anger, my hard work, it had all been channeled into creating something new and beautiful. I didn't know if I would ever have a real relationship with my parents or my sister again. Maybe, in time, we could build something new, something more honest. But I knew I would never go back to the way things were. I would no longer be the invisible support beam in someone else's structure. From now on, I would be the architect of my own life. And the foundation was solid.